Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm Ed Henry in for Tucker. And tonight, President Obama just will not stop talking. He only has 24 more days in office. That's when President-elect Donald Trump will be inaugurated. Yet the outgoing president is still giving interviews and seemingly insulting voters who elected Mr. Trump. Last night, it was his claim that he would have beaten Mr. Trump if only he could have one more term, slamming the president-elect and Hillary Clinton in one fell swoop, suggesting he would have been a much better candidate than her. But that's not all. Now the president's taking aim not at Trump or Clinton, but at you, especially if you're white and watching tonight in the South. In a podcast with his former senior advisor, David Axelrod, Mr. Obama suggested Democrats could not win over white rural voters because of race. And Democrats are so principled, they just won't give any ground, he said, on civil rights. So that we can fairly quote him, here's exactly what the president said.
Part of the challenge for Democrats and progressives generally is that if we cannot compete in rural areas, in rural states, if we can't find some way to break through what is a complicated history in the South and start winning races there and winning back Southern white voters without betraying our commitment to civil rights and diversity. If we can't do those things, then we can win elections.
Democratic strategist Eric Guster joins us live right now. Good to see you, Eric. I want to stipulate up front, the president's absolutely right about one point, that we have a complicated history in the South, and we have to be honest and straightforward about that. However, in explaining why Donald Trump won, why does he have to inject race?
Well, race was an issue in this election. Donald Trump was supported by the alt-right, which is the white supremacist right group, which thoroughly supported Trump, who actually came out, many of them came out and said today that if they will rebel against Trump if he does not hold to his values according to them.
You could point to some voters who felt that way, but what President Obama was saying, Eric, was basically all Southern white voters that we can't win them over, he says, as Democrats unless we compromise on diversity and civil rights. It sounds to me like he's saying they're racist. We can't win unless we give in on civil rights.
Ed, he did not say that, and you know he didn't say that. President Obama said that we have to talk to the Southern white voters, which I'm in Birmingham, Alabama today, so I know about Southern voters. This state has been red for so long that in order for the Democrats to win the South, they have to come into the South, talk about the issues that many voters, especially white voters, want them to discuss, and then try to infiltrate their loyalties to the GOP. The president did not state that all white voters were racist. He did not state that all white voters were voting just because Donald Trump believed in certain things. So that's not actually true.
But he said we can't win over these Southern white voters without compromising on civil rights and diversity. How else can you read that?
No, the president said that we have to win them over, but we can't compromise on civil rights and diversity.
That's what I said.
Because that is a divisive issue with some people, where they don't want you to talk about affirmative action issues. They don't want to talk about diversity in the workplace, but they still want their votes. Okay. So this is a very complicated issue that the president actually addressed, and I wish that Donald Trump would come out and address those issues, which he refused to do.
Okay, we didn't hear from Donald Trump today, but we did hear from another Republican, Mike Huckabee. He was on Fox and Friends with me and Brian Kilmeade. Abby Huntsman today. Here's what he said about the president's comments.
The rejection of Barack Obama in the South had nothing to do with race. It had to do with policy. It had to do with his pushing an aggressive abortion position upon people who think that life is precious and sacred. It had pushing an idea that we could redefine marriage from a biblical standard. It had to do with wrecking and destroying the economy and seeing people whose jobs provided them less money after years than it did before. It had nothing to do with color. It had to do with the content of the policy and the disaster that it wrought.
What about that point, Eric, there? He's a Republican, but can't you admit this was about the actual policies that were on the ballot? It was not about race.
There are several issues, and race is one of them, and we can't ignore that race is an issue in elections, especially this past election with Trump and Clinton. But in this particular instance, what Mike Huckabee just stated was wrong. Race was a factor. You look at the rally that he did in Huntsville, Alabama, the one he did in Birmingham, Alabama, in which a black man was attacked in Birmingham, Alabama, right here next to where I'm actually doing this segment.
Okay, but Donald Trump did not attack that African-American man.
His supporters did. His supporters were attacking them. And you look at the rhetoric right now with so many people doing racially motivated attacks, racially motivated things in the name of Trump. That clearly shows that race was an issue. Okay. Now, policy, that's another conversation. Okay, now, there are policy issues in which the South is very conservative, whether you're black or white, it's very conservative, so the Democratic Party would have a little bit of trouble infiltrating the South.
Well, let me play another soundbite from not a Republican, but a Democrat who I think disagrees with what you're saying. Bill Clinton, here's what he said in the campaign about white working class voters.
There's a lot of road rage out there because after the financial crash, it took a long time before income started going up again. There are still some families that if you adjust for inflation, their incomes are about what they were the last day I was president, more than 15 years ago, and costs are going up, right? And that's really tough.
Now, isn't Bill Clinton saying there that the reason why white working class voters were angry was about losing jobs, not about race?
Again, for the third time, race is one of the factors. We can't just put all of it in one bowl. Okay, race is one bowl of things, which is a problem and impacted the election. Then there's another dealing with policy. There's another dealing with economics. But race is one of those factors. And we can't stop ignoring that.
But Eric, why didn't President Obama say that? Why did President Obama, I'm sorry to interrupt, but President Obama didn't say we lost white working class voters because we didn't have a good jobs message. He said we can't win them over without compromising on civil rights. Why didn't he talk about that whole bowl like you are?
He was, well, I wish he should have called me and consulted with me. But the fact is that President Obama has stated several times about some of the policy issues that the Democrats have. He was talking about a flawed candidate, which I will tell you, Hillary Clinton was not a perfect candidate. And we have to remember that she did win the popular vote. She just won the votes in the wrong place.
Okay, let's get something. I know you also want to talk about this. Maxine Waters is a senior member of the Congressional Black Caucus. In terms of whether or not she'll work with this incoming president, here's what she told MSNBC.
I have no intention of pretending everything's all right, that we're going to work together. For me, as the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee, where he said he's going to bring down Dodd-Frank and he's going to get rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I'm going to fight him every inch of the way.
Well, let me, Congresswoman, if I could just interrupt you for 1 second, excuse me, but I just want to get this straight. Are you saying then that you would not sit down with President-elect Trump if he invited you to the White House to meet on common ground?
Oh, no, I won't go. I'm not going to sit down with him. I'm not going to go.
Eric, members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress, senior ones, will not even sit down with Donald Trump? Really?
That's a very complicated issue, Ed. But I love Maxine Waters, and I love her digging her heels in, fighting for what she believes in.
I'm all for fighting, but you won't sit down with the man?
He was the most divisive candidate that we've seen in decades, and I understand her position. I do believe that people should sit down and talk to him about their issues. He's the president right now. Well, he'll be the president in 20-some-odd days. He's the president-elect. He's the one who's going to be in office. We need to sit down with him, even if we disagree with him.
So, yeah, my question to follow up for Maxine Waters and for you is, what happened to Michelle Obama in the campaign saying, they go low, we go high?
Oh, man. Sometimes you have to go low to defeat people like Donald Trump. He was down in the pigs. He was down in the slop. If you're going to kill a hog, you have to jump down in the mud sometimes to get him.
All right,
and
Eric.
What the Democrats had to do, they were talking about we go high. You know, that can work at times, but sometimes you have to go a little low to beat him.
All right, Eric. You always go high. We appreciate you coming on the show.
We do.
Thanks, buddy. After 2 more days of President Obama, as we just said, coming up with excuses for why Democrats lost, and even claiming he could have won if he ran, as you can imagine, President-elect Donald Trump is not taking all of that lightly. As you can also imagine, he's been tweeting about it from his Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida, and that's where we find our man on the scene, Fox correspondent Peter Doocy, joins us live now from the Sunshine State. Good to see you, Peter.
Good to see you too, Ed. There was quite a scene up closer to where you are in Midtown Manhattan today, a suspicious package at Trump Tower, and this package, as it turns out, that sent tourists frantically running to safety turned out to be a bag of children's toys. Trump Tower is, of course, where the president-elect lives and works, at least for the next few weeks. But this is the most dramatic evacuation that we've seen at Trump Tower since it became the center of the political universe a few months ago. But the place is always packed with a very visible law enforcement presence. They responded quickly and determined there was no threat in just a few minutes. Right around the same time, the NYPD was trying to give tourists and residents and employees an all clear. The president-elect offered his latest response to the President Obama comment that if he was allowed to run for a third term in 2016, he would have beaten Mr. Trump. The president-elect has now tweeted another reason he doesn't think that would have happened, and he's directing a jab at a president that he has said that he enjoyed talking to on the phone lately with this quote: President Obama campaigned hard and personally in the very important swing states and lost. The voters wanted to make America great again. As for staffing moves today during the transition, the president-elect made George W. Bush White House alum Tom Bossert the new assistant to the president on Homeland Security and counterterrorism. Bossert is going to work alongside the retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn and says he's looking forward to doing that. This afternoon, the president-elect also gave the Trump Organization chief legal officer, who was also one of the campaign's top advisors on the American and Israeli relationship, a White House job. His name is Jason Greenblatt, and he now has the title of Special Representative for International Negotiations. And his appointment shows that the president-elect is not wasting any time trying to repair the bond between the U.S. and the U.S.'s closest ally in the Middle East, Israel. Today at Mar-a-Lago, the president-elect did just hold some high-level staff meetings, but we never saw him. Tomorrow, though, we are told he's going to ramp things back up the way he was at the end of last week with a full schedule from down here in Florida. Ed?
Peter, thank you. Just days after the United States refused to block a UN resolution impacting Israel, the Jewish state is lashing out at President Obama again. Earlier this afternoon, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed his disgust on Twitter, writing, quote, "The nations of the world respect strong countries that stand up for themselves and do not respect weak countries that bow their heads." The U.S. decision to abstain from the vote is leading some prominent journalists to reevaluate the president's approach to Israel and their reaction to it. Bloomberg View editorial writer Eli Lake caught our attention when he tweeted, quote, "I apologize for the times I defended Obama to my pro-Israel friends. I was wrong." It got me wondering why Eli Lake is expressing this regret now, and whether Jewish voters who have largely supported Democrats in at least the last 3 elections may now be reevaluating their own decisions to defend the president over Israel in recent years. So the man himself, Eli Lake, kind enough to join us live. Good to see you, Eli.
Thanks so much for having me.
What are you sorry about?
Well, I just say that I probably would not be considered the #1 Obama fanboy, but there have been plenty of times that I've written about how Obama has increased military aid to Israel. There's been plenty of times where I've sort of said, well, you know, he takes a nuanced approach. He protected Israel in the past from, sort of resolutions that singled it out in the United Nations. To do this in the final weeks and to do it in the context of a Middle East entirely on fire and the impotence of the U.S. to do much about anything in Syria, Libya. You can go through all of these hotspots where you're seeing a complete collapse of the state system itself. Then to basically come up with a resolution, which is the first time in 36 years the UN Security Council has been on the record with regards to the status of Jerusalem, when you've had several U.S. presidents in that interim period basically say until Barack Obama that, any final status agreement would recognize that there are Jewish population centers in and around Jerusalem and that to be part of the state of Israel. To basically pull that out and to reverse all of that and then to make it a matter of international law that will endure after Obama's presidency is extraordinary to me. Well, I don't think it helps the peace process. I certainly don't think it helps his legacy.
Well, let's break this down into a few points. First of all, as a journalist, you're absolutely right. I checked the record. You're not considered a fanboy of President Obama, as you put it. You challenged his narrative on Benghazi, for example, and you were brave to do that. However, why are you now saying I shouldn't have defended him? Journalists usually are not in a position to defend a president, Democrat or Republican. And you're right. I checked some of what you wrote. September of 2015, you wrote about helping Israel on this and defense spending. Quote, Obama has done more than his predecessors, financing the development of Israel's Iron Dome rocket defense system on top of the annual $3 billion U.S. subsidy to the country. My question being, that was a White House talking point for so long. So why did you use that in your column and basically say, yeah, he's been great to Israel?
Well, I've also been critical of him, but I'd say because it's factually correct. That is true. You have to sort of take the entire legacy and the point. My point on this is to say that I, for a period, gave the Obama White House a kind of benefit of the doubt on this, and I thought that certainly Obama had his views, but I think he really crossed the line here. And that's really why I tweeted it. It's gotten several hundred retweets at this point, I think. But yeah. my point on that is to say that, when we're covering these stories, you got to take the positive information and the negative information. That was a talking point, you're right, of the White House, but it was also true.
Let's get to the substance of the policy then.
Absolutely.
John Bolton was on this program, the former ambassador, last night. Here's what he said.
I think he was stabbing Israel in the front. I think this was clearly intended to do much more than affect the issue of Israeli settlements. I think when you read the text of the resolution carefully, it's an implicit repeal of the iconic Resolution 242 adopted by the Security Council after the 1967 war.
So let's wrap it up by asking twofold. One, Secretary of State John Kerry, we're told, is going to speak to the nation tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, from the State Department. What do we expect there moving forward? And secondly, I raised this at the top. Do you think, as you are now second-guessing support, or defense, I should say, of the administration, do you think American Jews who have largely voted for Democrats in the last few elections might say, wait a second, maybe they're not defending Israel?
Well, I'm not going to hold my breath on that last point. I'll be perfect as a Jewish American myself. But in terms of what Kerry would say, let me ask a deeper question on that. This is somebody who basically gave away a whole lot more than what Obama campaigned on in the Iran deal. Somebody who completely failed in the diplomacy on the peace process. This is somebody who has been humiliated time and again by the Russian foreign minister. And it's the end of this administration. We know there's going to be a major change. So the question is, why is John Kerry wasting his breath at this point, unless the intention here is to lay out a set of parameters for what they would like to see the final two-state solution look like, and then present that again and have another UN Security Council resolution. That is what a lot of Israeli sources are telling me in the last couple of days that they fear will happen.
That is a big question looming over John Kerry's remarks tomorrow. Eli Lake, you've always taken these issues very seriously. We appreciate you coming on Fox tonight to hash it out and talk about your own personal views on it. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now it's time for Twitter Storm, our nightly forecast of social media's most powerful weather patterns. Tonight, a twister of political controversy has returned, yes, to Broadway here in New York. When we last left the cast of Hamilton, they were lecturing Vice President-elect Mike Pence as he attended a performance of the hit musical. And now, the Hamilton creator, Lin-Manuel Miranda, is doubling down on the post-election Trump bashing, telling the Daily Beast that Mr. Trump's victory gave him a pronounced case of moral clarity. Miranda says he will, quote, keep fighting for the things he believes in that the president-elect does not. Of course, the Twitterverse had some thoughts on that. Tommy tweeted, "Phew, I can sleep better now. Yet another super-rich Hollywood person didn't like the election result. Hashtag yawn." Joe Vitolo said, "What's that, a return to an agenda that has brought America to her knees? The real Hamilton would rise up against you." America has. Adrian Muller tweeted, "What is the correlation between performing and understanding complex public issues? What's next? John Kerry on Broadway?" Eli Friedman said, "Musical theater may not be enough to convince the Rust Belt to vote blue. Give it a shot, though. Try anything." And finally, John tweeted, "If he cares so much about poor people, can he fight high ticket prices to see Hamilton?" That's interesting. I want to see the show. It's kind of expensive. That's tonight's Twitter Storm. And President-elect Donald Trump's plan to shut down his personal foundation has hit yet another major roadblock, and he's not happy about it. That story up next. Also, Democrats still playing the blame game over last month's shock election upset. You won't believe what they're saying now about FBI Director Jim Comey. They're still pointing the finger at the FBI chief. That story next. Tonight, President-elect Donald Trump is firing back at New York's Attorney General and the media over the controversy about his personal foundation. Democrat Eric Schneiderman says President-elect Trump can't shut down his personal foundation while it's being probed by his investigators. In response, Mr. Trump took to, of course, Twitter, writing, quote, "I gave millions of dollars to DJT Foundation, raised or received millions more, all of which is given to charity, and media won't report." He later followed up, quote, "The DJT Foundation, unlike most foundations, never paid fees, rent, salaries, or any expenses. 100% of the money goes to wonderful charities." The political panel joins us now. The Wall Street Journal's Shelby Holliday and the Washington Examiner's Susan Ferricchio. Good to see you both. I want to start with you, Shelby. It seems like Donald Trump believes that the media and the New York Attorney General, who's a Democrat, are just not going to give him a fair shot here.
No, and he really wants people to know that he did raise and donate millions of dollars. That is true. He also said, though, that 100% of his money has gone to charities, and he received a great deal of media scrutiny because he has made, or there are allegations that he has made illegal donations. You could look at Attorney General Pam Bondi in Florida, that he's engaged in self-dealing, that he didn't properly register his foundation in New York. So no matter what good his foundation has done, Donald Trump will be attacked for these missteps. There are a lot of legal issues surrounding his foundation.
There are legal issues, but Susan, it seems like that's a big part of the frustration for Donald Trump, which is Mr. Schneiderman, a Democratic Attorney General here in New York, last I checked, hadn't been investigating the Clinton Foundation, for example.
No, that's true. And as Shelby said, there are a lot of questions surrounding Trump's foundation about the self-dealing, what he spent the money on. Did any of it go to his campaign? Did any of it go on buying, portraits of himself? I think there are some real questions about the foundation and its expenditures. But on the whole, he's right when he says that he has raised millions of dollars for charity. That is true. And I think if you look at it overall, Ed, who has the last word on this? He's got 18 million Twitter followers, and the media who are contesting him on Twitter don't have a fraction of that in their following. So and in a sense, Twitter allows him to kind of circumvent the media thought on this and just speak directly to his followers, his many followers, and make this big declaration, whether or not it's 100% true.
Susan makes a good point about Donald Trump's megaphone. Someone who also has a megaphone, though, is Barack Obama, the outgoing president. There's been at least a recent tradition of former presidents, outgoing presidents, he's not former yet, kind of leaving the stage. But as we saw with these comments in the podcast with David Axelrod, Shelby, it seems like, Barack Obama is not going away quietly, number one. And number two, said, look, let me in, coach. If I had gone head-to-head with Donald Trump, I would have beaten him.
Right, and I can't help but be reminded of when I played basketball in high school, and we always said, we would beat the boys. You never play the game. You can't make comments like that. Both of them are guilty of making these comments.
It's sort of, you're right,
really
it's unprovable, and so why is he even bringing it up?
It's unprovable. On one hand, we had a really angry electorate that wanted change. They were really anxious about the economy. On the other hand, President Obama had really high approval ratings. It's impossible to know. It's just something we shouldn't even be talking about, but,
Susan,
here we
to
are.
keep the
Thank you,
basketball
Twitter.
metaphor, Susan, it's almost like a double bank shot, because it wasn't just Barack Obama going after Donald Trump. I could have beaten him. He was making it clear he would have been a better candidate than his fellow Democrat, Hillary Clinton.
I think this is all a precursor of the post-presidency Obama. And I've said this before, I think he will be the most politically active ex-president in modern history. And what he's basically saying is he's creating this us versus them meme that if I had run again, then the country would have voted for me, meaning everybody else out there is on the wrong side of the argument. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from the president when he becomes the ex-president, be it subtly or, overtly with his own Twitter feed about what he thinks of Donald Trump. He's not going to go quietly. He's moving a mile away from the White House. And I think he will be an absolutely powerful force for the Democrats and for Donald Trump to reckon with.
I think that's something we can all agree on. And also, there's a vacuum at the top of the Democratic Party right now, with Hillary Clinton getting off the stage, with uncertainty about who's running the DNC, these aging leaders on Capitol Hill. He may very well fill that vacuum. Shelby, Susan, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Democrats are still beating up FBI Director Jim Comey for how he handled the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Isn't it time to move on? And did he really do anything wrong? An outraged Democrat thinks so and is here next. Many disappointed Democrats are blasting FBI Director James Comey for his handling of the federal investigation into Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private email use. But is Comey really to blame for her shocking loss last month? Former Justice Department spokesman Matthew Miller seems to think it's at least a big part of it. He was kind enough to come in, explain his outrage. Good to see you, Matthew.
Thanks, Ed. Good to see you.
After all this time, what's your beef?
So I think it goes all the way back to July, the first press conference that Director Comey held, where he departed from FBI and Department of Justice rules and passed judgment on Hillary Clinton's conduct, something the FBI is not supposed to do when they're bringing charges, and extends to the letter he sent 11 days out from the election, which, you know, he sent it at a time when the FBI didn't know if they had any new information. It threw really a hand grenade into the middle of the election, and at the time, you know, Hillary Clinton had Donald Trump on the mat. The race was essentially over, and it changed the direction of the race, and I think eventually changed the outcome of the race.
But
that is an appalling thing for an FBI director to do.
Sure, but how do we know that the race was over? I mean, on a separate point, don't we now know for sure that the polling was off in a lot of states and some of the national polls? So for you now to say the race was over and Hillary Clinton was going to win, and this is the reason, with all due respect, that part is flawed.
No, well, I don't think it is. Look, two things can be true at once. You can look to other reasons why Hillary Clinton lost. Say if she had a different message, if she'd, you know, not had the email problems in the first place. You can come up with those things and say that if those had gone differently, she would have won. That can be true. It can also be true that she was going to win despite some of those problems. And I think if you look, you know, one of the best analyses I've seen is one that Nate Silver reported on last week that showed a 4-point swing to in Trump's direction after the Comey letter came out in those last 10, 11 days of the election. So without a doubt, there were problems with her campaign. Sure. But I think she would have won anyway if it hadn't been for his intervention.
Okay, whether Nate Silver is right or not, though, James Comey's the FBI director. He was selected and nominated by a Democratic president. And isn't this what we're supposed to have with FBI directors? Like it or not, he's supposed to be independent. He decided in July, I'm not going to move forward with charges. And then he decided, it was painful to Democrats, but late in the election cycle said, I got to take another look at this. I'm independent. And so whether you like it, I like it, or Republicans like it, because it's going to change in different election cycles, he's supposed to be independent. And you, as someone who used to work in the Justice Department, why interfere with that?
So you're right. I'm someone that worked in the Justice Department, and one of the things I learned is, yes, the FBI director is independent, as is the Attorney General, but he's also supposed to follow the rules. The FBI director is not exempt from the rules that say, if you're not going to charge someone, don't pass judgment on their conduct. He's not exempt from the rules that say you do not do anything publicly that could tip the scales of an election within 60 days of the election, let alone 11 days out. So yes, he's independent, but there are rules that have been put in place because the FBI and the Department of Justice have so much power to unfairly tarnish people's reputation. They're supposed to follow rules, and that's exactly what he didn't do in this case.
I mentioned the Justice Department in part because John Podesta, we both know him well, the former campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton. He's been very vocal on Sunday shows and in an op-ed recently suggesting the FBI is in disarray, and he charged that James Comey spent far more time on the email server than on the Russian hack of the DNC. And Loretta Lynch was asked about that very claim by John Podesta on CNN, and here's what she said.
I can't comment on Mr. Podesta's sources or where he gets his information or why he has that view. But what I can say is that he's not involved in the ongoing investigation, so he wouldn't be privy to everything that would have been done or said to that. But as I said, you know, he's entitled to his opinion.
So here's a Democratic Attorney General saying he's entitled to his opinion. It doesn't sound like she agrees with him on the facts.
Yeah, she may not. I think she's wrong. He's certainly not privy to all the facts, but we know enough now about the FBI director's conduct, both in the investigation into hacking, where he refused to join a statement that other members of the intelligence community put out, and in his handling of the Clinton investigation, to know that he's behaved certainly inappropriately with respect to the Clinton investigation. I think carelessly with respect to the Russian investigation. So, yeah, she can make that claim. I happen to disagree with her.
You disagree as a Democrat. Last question here, which is moving forward. There's been some speculation that James Comey, who we haven't heard from besides those letters back and forth right before the election, might make some sort of comments after the inauguration of Donald Trump. If he were to do that, is there something for you as a former Justice Department official in a Democratic administration, is there anything he can say that might fix any of this?
Yeah, well, look, there's nothing he can say that would fix it. I mean, he changed the outcome of the election, and there's no unringing that bell.
What do you want him to say, I guess?
But what I would like to hear from him is to admit that he made a mistake and that he's learned from it, that he won't do it again. To show some growth as an individual. He's someone that highly values his integrity, and I think that's led him to make mistakes to try to protect his reputation for independence. And I'd like to see that he knows that he understands that this was a mistake. I should have listened to the advice I got from others not to do this. And going forward, I'm going to follow the rules and not violate those rules when it suits my purposes.
I suspect the debate over James Comey is still just beginning. We appreciate you coming in to explain your views, Matthew.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. It's been a rough year and week when it comes to the deaths of icons from the 70s and 80s. Today it was actress, author, and screenwriter Carrie Fisher. She passed away at the age of 60. Fisher, of course, became an international superstar by playing Princess Leia in the Star Wars movies. Off-screen, she openly battled depression and bipolar disorder. She suffered a massive heart attack while flying from London to Los Angeles on Friday night. Our friend Frank Luntz noted today her passing brings to mind a line from her fellow Star Wars character Yoda, who said, quote, "Death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force." Here's maybe the only positive part we can take from this awful news today. Lucasfilm said her final film will not be compromised by her death. She had actually already wrapped up her appearances for the yet unnamed 8th episode of the Star Wars series, which we're told you'll be able to see on December 15th, 2017. Meanwhile, you've heard about President-elect Trump's plans for the Supreme Court, but did you know he has the chance to completely transform the federal judiciary? That story up next. Plus, mean tweets. Some of you were slamming Tucker for taking a vacation. I thought, great, it's not about me then. But I was so wrong. Some of you think I'm a terrible substitute. Keep them coming, I guess. You can reach me on Twitter, @EdHenry. Your cruelest tweets, at least so far, are coming up. Come on, show some mercy. On the campaign trail, President-elect Trump spent a lot of time discussing his vision for the U.S. Supreme Court. One topic that didn't come up as much is what he might do with the rest of the federal judiciary. The President-elect will have the opportunity to immediately nominate nearly 100 judges to federal courts all over the country. So just how big are the stakes? Chief Counsel for the Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative group, Carrie Severino, joins us now. Carrie, good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you.
We hear a lot about the Supreme Court. We'll get to that in a moment. But with this, more than 100 nominations coming up throughout the federal judiciary, he really has a chance, the President-elect, to put his stamp on the courts.
Yeah, and assuming he takes this as a top priority coming out of the gate, which I think he will. We saw when Obama came in, he actually spent a long time revving up his process. It wasn't until almost 2 years into his presidency that he even had half of his vacancies with nominees, let alone passing them. So I'm optimistic that Trump, because he's placed such a high priority on judges in his campaign with the Supreme Court nomination, et cetera, that I think he'll have the same priority on this and really get out of the gate strong.
Let's break it down in a way that our viewers can understand it in the sense of why it impacts them. And my sense is that on a lot of these federal courts, you don't hear about them as much as the Supreme Court, of course, but a lot of these big issues on immigration and other social issues as well, they're decided at these more mid-level courts, the appeals courts, for example, before they ever get to the Supreme Court.
That's right. The Supreme Court takes less than 1% of the cases that are appealed to it every year. So that means upwards of 99% are decided at the lower courts, the federal appeals courts and the trial courts. So it's hugely important. And in many cases, these are the courts that are going to be the front edge of the judicial trends going forward that the Supreme Court will also ultimately decide. So they can't be just given short shrift. This has to be the same, almost the same level of scrutiny that's given to these candidates that the team will be giving to who they decide to appoint to the Supreme Court.
Now, my understanding is back in the Bush administration, a lot of these appeals courts and whatnot were tilting right, and now they are more in the center, and that there's not a clear sense whether they're left or right, and that this is a chance for Donald Trump to move these courts to the right. Is that your sense as well?
Well, I don't know if I call them the center now. When Obama started, they were. Bush had done his job. Every two-term president can affect about a third of the judiciary, and he had done that. One of the 13 appellate courts had Democratic majority nominees, and the rest were Republican. Now 9 of the 13 have a Democratic majority. So Obama went more than half now are controlled by Democratic majorities. So I think this is an opportunity for Trump to push back on that to a certain extent. But Obama, like many other presidents, he actually had more nominees, I believe, that were confirmed than Bush. So they all get a huge stamp on these federal courts. It's an incredibly important role of the presidency.
Let's talk about the one that everyone focuses on, the Supreme Court. So you have Merrick Garland, who was nominated by President President Obama. Democrats are upset that he never got a hearing, let alone a vote. Now, President-elect Trump, when he takes office, is expected pretty quickly, we're told, to come up with a nominee there. What's your sense? I'm hearing from some conservatives, they want to see him, Donald Trump, pick a fight rather than come up with a compromise candidate, as some are saying, and pick someone in the middle and start this new Congress, this new presidency off on sort of a more positive, friendly note. There are conservatives saying no. From the beginning, he has to send a signal he's going conservative. What say you?
Well, I think Trump has put out his list. I think that list is part of the reason he won the election, because people were so encouraged by seeing this is the kind of person who will succeed Justice Scalia on the court, someone who's similar principles. But anyone on that list, because they share the principles of Justice Scalia, is someone that the left is going to put up a huge fuss about. Look at what they're doing with the cabinet. Their heads explode more every day as these people are announced. I don't think they're going to say, oh, okay, this is a nice compromise person. No, they're not going to be happy unless you pick, he appointed Merrick Garland. Right. And even then, who knows, they might fight it. So I think he needs to just go and find someone who's principled, who has the courage of their convictions, and is someone who is worthy of Justice Scalia's legacy. Last
question. I've got 15 seconds. I'm hearing from a Trump insider. They're planning for maybe not just one, but 3, 4, maybe more Supreme Court nominations because of various health issues and the age of justices. Is that a stretch?
I think 4 might be a stretch, but I think you could easily see 2 or 3. I mean, we have a lot of justices that are getting into their 80s and are at normal retirement age. So I think we should expect this is not going to be Trump's only opportunity to influence the Supreme Court.
Carrie, we really appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thanks.
And still to come, my colleague in Washington, Doug McKelway, is on deck. He's the subject of tonight's segment we called The Friend Zone. You probably didn't know he likes to play the banjo. What else don't we know about Doug? That's straight ahead. It's time now for the Friend Zone. With us tonight, one of our Washington-based correspondents, a star with more than 20 years of television experience, Doug McKelway. Doug, great to have you on tonight. Let's start with, how covering the Obama administration compares to racing around, as you've been doing some anchoring for Brett, and also trying to keep up with this emerging Trump administration. You've been in D.C. and here in New York, outside Trump Tower. How do you compare the two as this one starts up?
Well, you have a much better perspective than I do, having worked at the White House a long time, Ed. But my perspective is they were always very fair to us, Fox News reporters, maybe with a couple of exceptions. I can remember getting 1 or 2 dismissive emails from Josh Earnest in my coverage there. But for the most part, the Obama administration was very accommodating to me, always responsive with emails. Always willing to accept questions during Ernest's press briefings. I would say it's slightly different, though, when it came to presidential press conferences. Mm-hmm. I had the privilege of being at a couple of them and was loaded for bear with tough questions. And was never called upon when the president was there himself.
But what's it been like? Because the power center, it seems to me, has gone a bit from Washington to here in New York in terms of the fact that this incoming president may essentially make Trump Tower the part-time, if not full-time, White House.
I had a good friend of mine said that when Obama was elected, the power center of the United States moved from New York to Washington. I think it's moving right back now to the financial cabinet. It's not just because of Trump and because of Trump Towers. We're looking at people, across the spectrum in the cabinet who made their money on Wall Street or in finance in large part. And so we're looking at that power center shift back to New York. And to get the economy going, perhaps that's not a bad thing.
Now, let's talk a little bit about you and your distinguished career. A lot of people probably don't know that the news business...
Did you say distinguished or extinguished?
I said extinguished, but I meant to say... Okay. No, I said distinguished, and I meant it. What is it's sort of a family business for you in a way.
Boy, there's only one business you can get into in my family, and that's journalism. But I took a bit of a departure. That's a picture of my grandfather there, cool. Ben McKelway, with President Kennedy. He started out as a copy boy at the Evening Star newspaper in Washington after World War I, and rose to become the managing editor there, the editor-in-chief, the editorial chairman, eventually before he retired during the Kennedy administration. But he was really one of the gatekeepers, a key figure in journalism in the United States. In the 1940s, he was the first reporter to interview Emperor Hirohito after the Japanese surrender. He was invited by General Eisenhower to document the liberation of the concentration camps. One of the editorials he wrote in the Star was largely credited with giving the District of Columbia voting rights. His younger brother, St. Clair McKelway, was a high school dropout. He left Western High School, which is now the Duke Ellington School for the Arts in D.C. He dropped out in 10th grade, went on to become the managing editor of the New Yorker magazine during its heyday, one of the great writers for the New Yorker during the 1930s and 40s and the 50s, until the 1960s. And my grandmother was the first female editor of the George Washington student newspaper, the Daily Hatchet. There she is in 1917 or 1918. With that family legacy on my shoulders, I didn't want anything to do with print reporting, so my mother said, Doug, why don't you try TV reporting?
That's great.
Here I am.
And here you are. We're glad you're... And there you are as a young reporter. Not that you're not young now, but a younger reporter. A little darker hair. And
that's right.
You know, it's really awesome. Your office is right next to mine in Washington, and I did not know that about your family, so I'm glad you came on tonight. And we're honored that you're here carrying that family tradition on at Fox.
Likewise, Ed. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Good to work with you. Thanks, Doug.
Bye.
And coming up, it's time to hear from you. You won't believe the mean tweets that Tucker got today, but to be honest, I got some too. Stay tuned. Yeah, this is a special double-barreled edition of Mean Tweets, because some viewers are taking aim at me, the fill-in, while others are going after the big guy who's normally here. Starting with deplorable Ed Steele, who writes, Tucker Carlson has been on 1 month and already has vacation. I want that gig. To be fair and balanced, I should note others wrote in and said, yes, Tucker has only had this show for a month, but he's been working hard at Fox for years and deserves some family time. I agree. So then the tweets took a turn and started getting mean at me. Sarah writes, Ed Henry's good, but he's no Tucker Carlson. Happy New Year to you both. And that's not so bad. But then Tom Ryan tweeted, my 9-year-old, upon hearing Tucker Carlson is out this week, quote, that's sad. I like Tucker. Sorry, Ed Henry. Man, if I've lost the 9-year-olds, I mean, you know, come on. But then I got sort of a backhanded compliment as a viewer paid me a little homage for asking Hillary Clinton the question about her email server that led to that infamous wipe it with a cloth moment. JG Bear 101 writing, Ed Henry, wait, what? I was looking for Tucker Carlson. Can I get a cloth to wipe you off my TV with? LOL. Not too bad. But then it took an awful, horrible turn. Juliana tweeting, I think I speak for everyone when I say that I miss Tucker. You should play reruns or something. At least Tucker would be in them. Ouch, Juliana. You'd rather watch reruns of Tucker than new episodes of me. All right, but as we get ready to start a new year, Laura Johnson Naps is giving me a glimmer of hope. I like you both, she tweeted. My dog is named Tucker after TC. Maybe my next one will be Ed. Yeah, it's gone to the dogs already. But tomorrow, it's your turn to be king for a day. If you had absolute power and could do one thing to improve America, what would it be? Tweet me at Ed Henry or email Tucker Carlson tonight at foxnews.com. That's about it for us tonight. Tune in each night, 7 p.m. Eastern, to that show that is a sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Also, don't forget to DVR the show. The O'Reilly Factor is up next. Tonight on The Factor, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, and whether the administration sold out a close ally. The Factor also dug into the vault and found one of Bill's past interviews with Carrie Fisher. And come back here tomorrow night. I'll be live. No rerun of Tucker.